You record it or do I?
I'll
I think you
record
do because
it.
you're the
I can
host.
do it to my computer, yeah. Okay, so it's now recording. All right, great. Well, thank you so much for having me and hosting me on this platform. It's been an honor to kind of see other people's work and other people's presentations, whether it's related to physical health or, you know, activism work in the community. And it's really been nice to start this project that aims to bring people together in more platforms like that. So I think through COVID, I really saw some groups build up through this. And I think the Sangha group was one of them. So in modeling that and seeing what I've seen with other groups, that's kind of the goal of this project, is to just bring more people on virtual platforms to talk and share ideas and network. So this is Christen Brown. I met him through James Brady, and he does work and business with Moringa. And so I'm a researcher on Moringa. And we were able to kind of combine forces where he's well connected in the community. And then I bring in some of the science. And so we met, and he had already kind of had my publications on Moringa. And then we've been able to kind of work and build and moving forward on that work in California. And then as that started, let's see. Can I do this? I'm trying to go to the next slide. Here we go. So around January, I think because of the climate of last year, there have been a lot of calls within the university system and grant system related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we put in a proposal, for a one-year grant for $10,000 to establish this center of expertise. And these are the different UC campuses. There are already 2 centers of expertise. There's one at UC Davis, and it's called One Health. So it's aimed to link human health, animal health, and the environment as well. And then one at Berkeley that's focused on women's health. So we're trying to, you know, not just connect the UCs and getting more people into global health and more diverse staff, but also then, you know, the communities in California and the global community, because we're realizing, you know, all these things are connected, and the health of everyone is vital. If we didn't learn that last year, you know, this ongoing pandemic. So their goal at the UC Global Health Institute, this kind of call, and this is also to kind of step back and say, I think a lot of us have these efforts and programs, and there's always grants that are out there that can allow us to access and fund our passion and our work. So when I saw this call, I thought, wow, almost everyone I know is working towards these goals. You know, so this is one of theirs, is to decolonize global health. And what does that mean? Even sometimes the language of these things is important. So they're putting on different series and talks and starting to bring these issues more to the forefront. They're also trying to diversify their leadership and engage more international partners to kind of rethink these strategies. I know that Salim is also kind of in the yoga community doing the same thing with Yoga Alliance, which is kind of a national brand of yoga that certifies. And it's the same thing, as they're now facing these issues of diversity, but at the same time within those leadership positions need to bring in diversity there. So this is the same thing I think the UC system is facing. They want to put in more grants and awards. I'm not going to go through all of these, but this was generally the idea of what they're calling for. And I would say it wasn't just this institute. There's definitely at the state and federal level, there are a lot of diversity grants coming through. So there are a lot of opportunities in this. These are the last 2 of their goals, is research and education, and then anti-racism communication strategies. So these are really big concepts within a large university system, and that from my experience and many in universities and academia is that they tend to be fairly siloed from the community. So what we wanted to do is create a center of expertise that would then work with community members and universities. In California, there are, and most places in the world, there are extension workers, and that's usually what, operates at that interface of engaging with the community and the universities or the private sector. But those roles aren't always well funded, I would say, in the US and in Africa, in my experience. And this is what is, at least my role as being kind of a global citizen, is being a translator, where you can then really work with people and try and understand their goals. So we proposed to create a center that would address these different topics: historical threats and opportunities to generate viable food systems throughout the African diaspora. And this is basically allowing people that we know from Kenya, Rwanda, Ghana, South Africa, and then through Brazil and the Caribbean, and then through Black communities within the US. And then political, social, institutional, all these different factors that go into food, because a lot of times also we kind of silo these concepts where health is one thing, food is one thing, poverty is another, and it's very clear that these things are interlinked. Understanding and decolonizing language. That is also really interesting. I'm just sorry, I'm going to admit one other person. In that, there's even things I'm learning, terms such as, a food desert is often used to describe places where they can be urban areas where there isn't access to food. And then in talking with other people, they had even said such language can be biased, right? I mean, Detroit or LA, some of these places are not actually deserts, but the concept of putting that in the language can also be detrimental. So we're having hosts that are also talk about different ways to talk, different ways to use words to describe these things as well. And then hopefully eventually getting to real health empowerment and agricultural self-sustainability. So once you can grow your own food and you have, a little bit more autonomy around what you're putting in your body and around knowing what's in those foods, that is a great deal of power that can then contribute to, education, income, and a lot of these markers of, better livelihoods. We also hope to overcome barriers to enter into global health. So, this is a major issue, is that everyone's saying, well, we want to diversify, we want inclusion. But when you look at the numbers of people that are in these fields, it's still, they still represent much lower percentages generally than they do in the population. So that's an issue. For example, in Los Angeles, you have a large population of Latino people, but in the university, they mainly only represent 10 or 15% of the students. So that's a gap, right? And that's what we're trying to, how do you fill that gap? You have to start back kind of at the community level. And then we're looking at social equity and resilience in times of, climate change and COVID, and how do people still do grassroots work while there's a pandemic going on? And, through platforms like Synergy Yoga and bringing people together and finding new ways to maneuver around challenges. And I think that's where sometimes the lessons of tough times and harsh conditions in Africa, where you don't have irrigation, people are problem solvers, and so it's worthwhile to share these ideas, especially as now climate change is affecting California, and 50 years from now, it will be as hot as it is in sub-Saharan Africa. So the US and the world has a lot to learn from these places that have already been faced with challenging conditions. And then ultimately we're trying to really, co-design and really have everyone at the table. So this isn't a top-down intervention program, which is usually the case with these types of things, where it's, these kind of academics, and they think, okay, well, how are we going to solve this problem? And we come in with an implementation plan. And that's been shown over and over again to be very unsuccessful, right? It has to come from people themselves. So that's our overall goal. And then I will just get into kind of, these are some of the folks, and I'm just going to be introducing them, and was hoping more of them would be on the call, especially Christian, but it's just really an array of people. Patrick Mbolo runs a CBO in Kisumu, Kenya, and we're working together with a community to both grow moringa and then eat moringa, and we're now using that to assess some health factors. So we'll take blood samples and measure blood sugar levels and inflammatory markers and breast milk supply. Derek Chapman's an individual down in Southern California who's developing new techniques on how to grow crops in very high temperatures and climates, so using new technologies. Chef Kabui is a Kenyan cook and food political kind of activist. He's in North Carolina and is one of the real, experts in this group on food language. And he runs an organization in Naivasha where they're training kids in Kenya about how to, everything from growing food to then eating it. Renee is a good friend and auntie of Salim's. She runs an organization in Ghana called Kokoro Bite that educates youth from all skills as well, from, as gardening, making materials and clothing, really cool stuff where they get recycled jeans and then make other crafts. The last time she was on the Sangha, she also said they were doing coding, and has had a real focus of this Pan-African experience of being a Black American and then going back to Africa. And those stories, I think, have been relevant for generations, but at this time right now, particularly this past year, have been even more telling. So, I think a lot of people in the US want to go back to Africa right now. And so she's an excellent resource to kind of share what those journeys are like and those experiences in both places, and how to really inspire the youth, I think. Salim is here. Salim, do you want to talk briefly about, if you're available, just maybe a little bit about what you're doing since you're on the call? You can be a little sub-host. Maybe he's not there. I'll wait and see if he comes back. Which is interesting because Salim is also from the US, but then has been working in Kenya, also spent time in Brazil. And so Brazil, Salim, are you there? Do you mind introducing yourself a little, like talking about your project and kind of how it relates to health and empowerment and justice for a minute or two?
Happily, yeah. Sure. This is Kibera Rising specifically, yeah. So I run a program called Kibera Rising specifically, Carrie, more than synergy, right?
Yeah, sure.
Shoot. Okay.
Either one is fine.
So I direct I'll give a brief overview of both. I direct a program called Kibera Rising. Kibera is considered a slum community in Nairobi with an estimated 1 million residents in the area. There's several villages that make up Kibera. A few years ago, I was put in contact with an organization called Kibera Social Arts, who has a program called Slum Dance Africa. Basically, they're break dancers, and the founder, Victor Onyango, established this program as a community resource following the 2007 post-election violence. Because of tribalism, as some of you know, in Kenya, elections can be somewhat volatile so he had some really traumatic experiences with friends dying and so forth, and was very passionate about dance. So he created this program, Slum Dance Africa, as a resource for youth in the community to have something to be engaged with. And breakdance was really what he was passionate about. He's a self-taught dancer who learned on YouTube. Really amazing story. This program really expanded and touched, it started to incorporate all of East Africa. I was put in touch with them. Now, my background, I teach Capoeira Angola, which for those of you who might not know is an Afro-Brazilian martial art. And I was connected with Victor through a mutual friend from the US who's a Capoeira practitioner. It's about 4 years ago. I started volunteering in Kibera and eventually applied for a grant to get support for the program. The main focus of the program was to teach capoeira, but also life skills for youth in Kibera. And that has since transitioned to the main focus now is a teacher training program wherein I train the older students, teacher trainers in Capoeira Angola, and it creates and they now get a stipend as teacher trainers. We've also this year expanded the program from just Capoeira to a broader program, which we now call Kibera Rising, and that encompasses 3 sub-programs. The Capoeira program, we have a program for girls who've been going through a lot of trauma during the pandemic, including sexual abuse from family members, this sort of thing. Really, it has had a really strong effect in Kibera. And the third program is support for the breakdance program. So the umbrella program now is called Kibera Rising. And it's really about youth empowerment. It's about training, offering some tools to the youth in Kibera to be able to use the arts for employment, but also meanwhile get direct stipends. And we also are able to, through the program, provide to pay for beautiful new space. The space was really cramped where we were before, and now we have a much larger space. They just, in fact, had a competition, a breakdance competition a few weeks ago with over 100 members and youth in attendance. So it's really been very active. Yes, and so that's kind of the model for Kibera Rising. Briefly, Synergy, it's this platform, and a lot of what we do is oriented around community work through wellness. So yoga, meditation, sanghas like this, where we really are sharing information and knowledge. That's like a key foundation. So this is essentially what we do. And of course, that looks a lot of different ways depending on who's presenting. But we basically what we're doing is creating community spaces where we can share, incorporating elders, and starting to bring this work more and more in live venues through retreats, through trainings, and other sorts of spaces in the Synergy platform.
Great.
Does that make sense? Is that good?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
right, cool.
I think it's perfect. And I think kind of the main relevance too is that, you know, the rates of unemployment and youth engagement are challenging all over the world. And so part of like wellness is, you know, whether you're doing capoeira or you're engaging in breakdancing or a gardening program or something, that's also just so beneficial. And so as I approach this grant, you know, they're looking for really like, what are these health outcomes, or what can you measure? And so that's also interesting to think about when the programs are really holistic, right? It's not like you're just teaching capoeira or you're just teaching empowerment. So I'm starting to try and think of more ways that we can measure these outcomes as well. And Chef Kabui just joined the call. And do you mind introducing yourself? Thank you so much for joining. And I'm just kind of going through who's on the panel. We had a little bit of a delay in getting started, but yeah, do you mind saying hello and talking a little bit about your organization? You're just muted, that's the only thing.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, so yeah, I just joined in again. I tried to join earlier, and there was a technical hitch, so I wasn't sure. So I just happened to try. So
thank you for trying again.
Yeah, so excuse my tardiness, but yes, for everybody else who has joined in, and for those who have convened this gathering, my name is Edye Kuyper, and I was born in Kenya. Lived there for 20 years. Moved here to the US to go to college. Been here for 3 decades now. I studied political science and philosophy when I first I went to college. Then I studied medical anthropology and anthropology. Did activism for a while. Did some independent reading, activism, because by the time I graduated from college, I realized that's the most political thing that you ever touch in your life. And it's also the most intimate thing that you ever touch in your life. And between the politics of food, the intimacy of food, I think life happened. So I worked all around all food issues. I'm interested in all matters food, all matters equity, all matters community. And right now, I work with different organizations to help raise funds. I work as a strategist for different organizations at college campuses until COVID in person. But since COVID, I've been mainly working to build a food literacy and sustainability center in Kenya, in a place called Naivasha, as a way of just balancing some of the work I do here in the US, and also create opportunities for young people. And I started it as a food startup that is more futuristic, thinking about how I can address youth empowerment. I can understand food sovereign, a level of food that people have as a way of dealing with health issues, as well as just cultural issues, preserving some of the old indigenous foods that we have, and also sharing or expanding that culinary repertoire by sharing food from the South. So we know that transatlantic slave trade brought a lot of African seeds to the US. And so I'm trying to put the spin on it by sharing more positive food, also foods from the South that I've come to learn, come to enjoy, or know about, to expand food repertoire in our area. So, for example, we're growing 25 basils on our spot. So, and as well other things. So, yeah, so I'll leave it at that. And yeah, and I'm glad to be.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just pulled up your website as well. So if anyone wants to look a little more into it, and these are exactly the kind of programs that we're trying to support and highlight. And then also when people are, looking for partners in grants, that those resources are then available. And, when I do programs, then I can learn more about food literacy, and again, crossing even cultures where it's going to be not just in one language, but multiple languages as well. And then I'm just going to thank you so much for that. And then I'm going to just go back. Where are we? Here we go. We were here. And I'll just keep introducing some other people that are going to be involved, such as Rafael. He's down in Brazil. He's a graduate student who does sustainable farming. And he was able to get a fellowship to come to the US and do some Moringa research with me. And he's visiting with Edye right here in the Sacramento, Davis area. And Edye works at Communicare.
You're still on Chef Kabui's website.
Oh, okay. How did that? Let's see. Thank you. Let's go back here. Okay. This should work. So yeah, Edye, do you want to tell us a little bit about your Communicare clinic as well, and kind of the gardening program, and just some of your thoughts?
Sure. So the picture with myself and Rafael there in the bottom left was taken during our horrible wildfires last summer. And I think that picture is really a great little way to communicate some of the things that we're attempting to address, because there's the environmental aspect that we're all dealing with climate change, as well as these more social components of food and health and justice. So I was working at UC Davis with various global nutrition and agriculture projects up until 2.5 years ago, and was ready to do more hands-on work at the community level. And an opportunity presented itself to work within the healthcare sector, which was completely novel to me. A local community health center was interested in using some of their property to install a garden. And with a background in nutrition and agriculture, that just sounded like exactly what I wanted to be doing. I was so new to the healthcare sector that I have been in the middle of a big a big learning process, a big learning curve. And in that time, I've come to a point where I'm understanding more of the culture of healthcare in the United States. And a lot of the concepts that the Institute is intended to address are definitely very relevant to our work. So the goal of our food programs is that we would connect people to each and to healthy food as an integral part of their healthcare experience, so that it would be something that was coming from the doctors and medical staff who, in many cases, an outsized role in being able to influence people's behaviors, and that it was also not something that was separate from the medical world. And little by little, and we are doing in terms of classes, but of course, COVID has made the engagement and interpersonal component much more challenging than we originally hoped. And throughout all of this, there's a very apparent need to be more engaged, which is especially, again, difficult with COVID. So there are multiple different goals within what Carrie outlined that I think that our project could speak to, and that we also struggle with. So I'm happy to fit in however we can. When Carrie and I first discussed the possibility of the food programs within CommuniCare being a partner in this, our goal was that we would identify engaged patients who could speak for the work instead of. So I think I may be more of the liaison to people who might have, it might be from, I don't actually live in this community of Woodland. I live in Sacramento, which is about 30 miles, maybe 20 miles. It's half an hour away from Woodland. But those are some of the general concepts that we're working to address and struggling with in our work.
And Edye, could you just highlight too, I mean, I know you'd mentioned it to me, just kind of, again, I was talking about these gaps and just kind of, for example, like the general rate of diabetes in the general public versus what you're seeing in these clinics and the populations that are.
Yeah, so probably explaining a little bit, especially for people from other parts of the globe, what community health centers are in the United States. It's not too different from the health centers that you would probably in Kenya and other countries. The what we call them in the United States, our federal designation is federally qualified health centers, which is a term that's connected to funding, and it in order to qualify, you need to agree to treat anyone regardless of their ability to pay or their insurance status. And in the United States, because our healthcare is so dependent on whether or not we have insurance, whether we can afford that or our jobs entitle us to it, it really means that this system of community health centers around the country, we're thousands in numbers. Just in the state of California, I believe there's 1,700 individual community health centers. We treat very low income individuals. And because of health disparities, that means that in our case, the Yolo County, where we're located, which is the same county where UC Davis is also located, is actually a very, on the whole, healthy population. The prevalence of diabetes, for example, is 7% in the county of Yolo. And within our population of patients, it's a 12% prevalence. We know that has increased probably quite dramatically since COVID-19 started. We've seen really dramatic increases in people's hemoglobin A1 cells. So maybe it's even as much as twice the general population prevalence now. And that is one statistic that I have off the top of my head. I know also that our food insecurity are multiple times higher than the general population in Yolo County, and the individuals who are receiving care through our health centers are about 90+% and households that are living below the federal poverty level, which I know that some of that's kind of tough to other contexts, but for those of you that are located in the US, that's about $24,000 a year for a family of 4.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And that's, I think, also what's been telling to me is that these issues of extreme poverty are not just in Africa or overseas. They're very much within California, within the communities within the US as well. So I think it's interesting to be connecting and basically putting gardens in at hospitals and really connecting these fields of nutrition and health. And that's one program also where Edye and I have worked together, where this nutrition sensitive agriculture. So we're not just growing food for calories, but we're growing food for our wellness and our health. So thank you for that. And I'm just going to keep introducing a few others that aren't on the call. Effie Gantz, a wonderful woman I just met from South Sacramento. She's working with numerous organizations, also women in shelters, and also facing a lot of health issues. And so she gets them gardening and is also involved with some schools. Craig Cohen is from UCSF, and he's been working in Kenya and in San Francisco for the past 40 years on HIV, as one of the leading HIV researchers, and really looking at interesting comparisons between populations in Kenya and in the US and San Francisco. And most recently, he started a project called Shamba Maisha. Shamba is farm in Swahili, Maisha is life. And it was the first largely funded NIH grant to address HIV through an agricultural intervention. So they went and did trainings. They gave pumps to people so they could pump water from the nearby river, gave them seeds, gave them education. And then the outcomes were actually health outcomes, such as adherence to antiretrovirals. And so this is a really interesting tale. And it's now expanded where they're looking at life outcomes like happiness. I mean, these are actually scientifically quantifiable in some ways because you can do surveys. Do people stay married? Is there less domestic violence? All basically coming back to the idea that if you can grow your own food and have that autonomy, it starts to create a rippling effect in all of these different aspects. So we plan to kind of look at his Shamba Maisha project that's now expanded. He has lots of different people working with him, a lot of Kenyans that now run a program called FACES that is also addressing HIV. I'll keep things moving. Oli Bachi is one of these ag extension workers that does work at the interface kind of farmers and the university. He works down in Southern California. He is originally from Ethiopia, and they're working also in these very, very hot climates, you know, where it's kind of using that as a testing ground for where other places are going to be facing those conditions. Kala Washington is a farmer up in Marysville who just started growing moringa last year, and basically trying to expand his farm as an entrepreneur and farmer to include camping and then education for youth. So we've been bringing kids from Oakland and the Sacramento area up to his farm to really, you know, get their hands in the dirt. And this is even in itself, you know, there's been studies that have shown that literally touching dirt, the bacteria in the dirt release serotonin within your body. So the act of gardening itself can make you happier. And yet a lot of us aren't doing this anymore. So these projects are also involving that aspect of it. Gaidi Faraj is a colleague of mine. He was the dean of the School of the African Leadership University in Rwanda, which is a really interesting organization that's bringing students from all over Africa to be really the next leaders of the continent. They talk about being job creators instead of job seekers. So changing the paradigm a bit about structure, power, projects, economics in Africa. And they definitely also function on, you know, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and looking at global challenges. So if they're going to start a business, it definitely should have what we often talk about as a triple bottom line, meeting social needs, economic needs, and environmental needs. This is me, and this was a trip to Uganda, which was also really amazing. So I would just be a part of this panel and talk about my work with Moringa and how that's enabled me to learn from farmers, work with farmers, and then share those conversations in different places. So this woman is in Uganda. She's got her moringa trees, but then she's also growing other leafy greens underneath. So they're developing these sustainable farms where people are doing more permaculture. And so it's not just one crop that they're selling to a market and they're locked into that price. So these are some of the, small lessons that we start to learn of how do you build resilience into communities. If things do change, then are you able to adapt? James is on the call. James, do you want to introduce yourself as well? Do you mind? I'm just wanting to see if I have
Okay, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me, Carrie? Hello, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. James Brady, Continue to Farm, located here in Southern Cal. You hear okay? Can hear okay? Okay. I see Dr. Colley's on the house. So yes, Carrie and I met years ago, and we've been preaching this message of nutrition, particularly with Moringa, throughout the country, the continent, around the world. And part of what I've been doing over the last 7-8 years is I train in hydroponics, aquaponics, farmaponics, just 21st century growing. And I think one of the most important things that has happened around food security and food justice in America has been the creation of the Urban Agriculture Department, which to me is a platform that generates interest as well as income for those that are into urban farming. So one of the things that happens within cities and counties is as they look at the future for future planning is looking at urban ag ordinances. So part of what an urban ag ordinance would do is allow you to grow food in your backyard, a rooftop, patio, indoor, outdoor, for health and for profit. And it's a good way to bridge some of the gaps that we have with food security, in particular with a lot of the your health departments that are a part of the city and county's infrastructure. For instance, one of the things that we did with in Sacramento is we partnered with the Sacramento Health Department, who was using SNAP dollars that came from USDA. So how all of that happened is Sacramento had what we call a Champion for Change initiative that was tied directly to nutrition and community health. So when I started having conversations with them, she says, well, we're buying hose, rakes, garden supplies, tools, and all of this stuff, fertilizer, and we do this every year. And I says, well, what if I designed something where you would just one-time payment and you would have a garden that would last eternity? And I gave a presentation, and that was actually the first contract that I got, setting up gardens in schools. So from that contract, we ended up with 17 locations throughout Sacramento. And some of the pictures you is small greenhouse, I call some screen house. And we basically using worm castings in these systems to, because it's really important that once we start to teach children, youngsters in the school districts how to grow food for profit and for health, and is to make it real simple. So all of our gardens were designed right about 3 feet off the ground in these large bins where we put in a lot of worm castings, and it's a recirculating water system. And as a result of that, typically we can go in and put them in a couple of days, whether or not we are designing it around food justice, food security, but ideally is that we are trying to grow the next generation of farmers at an early age. This will ensure that the communities that they live in the future will be sustainable. So those are some of the things that we're doing in Sacramento. Globally, we're working with Africa Evolved, and that is to build out gardens throughout the African diaspora to grow more moringa. So part of that effort is also plant trees, train farmers. We have the Africa Orangutan value chain that's been established in the last 4 months. And then we have an Odyssey to Africa. And part of that, the Moringa Project is building farms in over 30 African tribal kingdoms. They have established working relationships with different tribal kingdoms in order to farm thousands of acres of land for moringa and other farms produced via permaculture or traditional African farming. So part of this whole global effort is to make moringa a staple crop throughout the world, just for its nutritional values. As most of us already know, there's no other tree on the world that's like moringa. So part of this coming together with the diaspora is to basically grow enough moringa inside the continent of Africa where there will be some price controls in the future, unlike the oil and the diamonds. The moringa has the potential to really strengthen the economy. It also has the ability to create healthier farms. And when I say healthier, I'm talking about anything that resides on the farm, whether it's a chicken, the cattle, the goats, the humans, everybody can benefit from moringa. So I think the message is clear. And over the last 4 or 5 months, it's been abundantly clear from all over the world that people are now starting to pay attention to moringa and the impact that it's creating globally. So we're not alone in this journey, and I'm just happy to continue to be part of Carrie's journey, as well as some of the other folks that are working with us currently to particularly to make moringa a staple crop in California. We got our work cut out for us, but we're here and are rolling right along. So with that, Carrie, I'll leave it if anyone has any questions about the different types of gardens that could be grown. My background is more, I believe that if you live in an apartment building, house, complex, part of your food should come from less than 10 feet from your kitchen table. So if you live in a condo, apartment, and a house, then you should be able to grow something a short distance away from your stove. And that will in itself bridge the gap to keep us healthier. So with that, I encourage everyone to continue to farm and let's make this happen.
Thank you so much, James. I really appreciate it. And those are, yeah, definitely having access to food closer to you makes it more secure, right? So that's a really interesting way to put it, I think. So, and I think just kind of looking at this slide, I did not have time to add Christian and Dr. Michelle Fu's name underneath, but I will. But this is kind of telling about James' Justice's role in my life and my research career is that everyone pictured here is a connection that he introduced me to. So Christen Brown is in the Sacramento area that had known James and connected me with him. He was supposed to be on this call as well and runs an organization called Creation of Society, where they're also talking a lot about food sovereignty and getting kids really to experience the whole gardening process and the empowerment of healthier foods. Dr. Michelle Fu is at Alabama State University. She's an entomologist and knows James. So the two of them reached out to me because they have a new project on hemp, cannabis for hemp production, and they're using moringa as a biofertilizer. So that's the other thing, is sometimes you have to think about the whole value chain of food. So even if moringa isn't consumed for humans, it can then also be extracted or used for the nutrition of the soil. So we're all now working together to put in grants to build, and share the knowledge from moringa cultivation in Asia and Africa and the Americas up into these more colder climates in the US, as we are facing food security issues ourselves and health disparity issues. Kimberly Wright was also introduced to me through another friend of James. She is a vegan chef down in LA, and she's going to be helping with the Moringa grant in making new recipes and making them amenable to younger people and what they're really looking for. And so she's also they're certified as socio-equity farmers. So she's also in the cannabis industry. And I think most of you are familiar with the fact that this industry certainly incarcerated a lot of people of color in the process. And now that it's become quite a lucrative industry, it's only represented by about 1% to 2% Black-owned cannabis dispensaries or farms. And so there's new equity programs that are trying to integrate. And as we're doing this, we're also trying to keep that wellness and health aspect to it. So she's going to make beautiful recipes and Instagram videos and do a little of the social media around some of these topics. And I'll be going down to LA to meet her next week. She just opened up a juice bar in South Central. And so it's like, these are really the people on the ground in these communities, in these urban areas that are still pushing health and wellness and, a real sense of community. And this one we have actually, Barry, do you mind? Dr. Barry Colley just jumped on the phone on the call as well. And I think I have your picture somewhere here. Maybe it's in another slide. But do you mind introducing yourself? Here we go. And tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how we've been working together related to food justice and your project.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Waterman. I appreciate getting on the call. I'm all the way over in the middle, south midsection of the country. I operate in 3 small nonprofits, 7 Harvests, which I developed as a result of working on famine mitigation in Ethiopia back in the 80s. Well, the idea of 7 Harvests came from that experience, but I've had a balanced career of working with small farmers in Africa as well as in the US. And I've come to some conclusions about the challenges of small farmers. That is to produce enough product to be competitive in the marketplace, whether it's a local food system, regional, or international. And so there's the issues of access to land, capital, capital being money, and human capital. We are trying to mitigate the flight of young people out of agriculture, and dealing with what remains is a lot of very, very traditional farmers who don't understand the enterprise business. They understand putting a crop in the ground and in the soil, but not going beyond. And this is the case in the Mid-South. In a lot of southern states, farmers have not made the transition from being producers who provide raw product to becoming producers who are business oriented towards business. And to me, that has reduced, that is one of the problems that cause food security issues in our community. The fact farmers are not, the farmers in the South are not currently connected with the opportunities that the food industry provides. They're not organized. Organizing them into cooperatives is a good idea, but it's had many failings. I think sometimes we need to organize a unit level, a county level where people get to know each other and trust each other and so forth. So I agree with James Brady. I'm fast friends. Seven Harvest has worked both in rural Eastern Shore and urban Memphis, Tennessee, and Shelby County in our work. We put up hoop houses and high tunnels in those communities as well. And so we've had a chance to interface with both communities, and I see a need not only in the diaspora in Africa, the continent, and the African and Caribbean populations here in the US, a need to connect urban and rural farmers. Because we know that in urban communities, sometimes the land is not available to scale up in the marketplace. And so you need connections with rural communities. And I think we have to harmonize the economic benefits to accrue to both rural and urban communities. I don't see one as separate from the other. So I tend to look at, I think that having a career that focuses on farmers in Africa and in the US helps me to think that way. The connection, connecting people, growing food security, greenhouses, cooperatives. There is a lot of multidisciplinary work that needs to take place. Okay, Dr. Waterman is a scientist, social scientist, rural sociologist, extensionist, economist, to be in this fight together, in this struggle together, as well as newness. And we need, creative ways to reach people. I've heard a lot since the pandemic about mobile vaccination centers. Well, we need mobile outreach to our communities as well. They can't always come to us. We got to go to them a lot of the time. Some of the things I've been doing in Africa that I just want to reference before I finish is for the last 10 years, I've been involved primarily in Ghana, West Africa, with what we call the torchbearer diaspora. And our primary project in torchbearer is African collegiate entrepreneurs. We had the understanding that we could change and create more opportunities if we help young people in Africa be entrepreneurs. And today we have a lot of competition for that interest. There's so much entrepreneurship programs in Africa, but I still think that what's missing is the trust and trying to pilot something that really works, that can be replicated across different communities. And so I see a lot of, joining verbally in the movement for entrepreneurship. Sometimes I call it farmpreneurship, because we really need to link a lot of young people still focus on jobs and not becoming entrepreneurs. I know there's a lot of good young entrepreneurs, but still in some of the African countries, they still want to be what to do as opposed to have the skills and abilities to be interdependent, not so much dependent. And so that's the issue. But we have done a lot with ACE, the African Collegiate Entrepreneurship Program. And we need another generation ACE that's upscale and gets at some of the issues that I've just talked about, how to consolidate the effort. So Moringa is a fascinating plant. I can't imagine it not succeeding at some level with all its multiple value chain. And as a superfood, as a way to clean up the environment, as a way to bring hope in communities. And one of the things I want to do is bring Moringa to the Mid-South. There's a lot of interest. When I mention Moringa, just casually, I get a feedback. What is it? How does it work? Some people have heard about it and haven't tried it. And so now I'm grooming myself with the help of my California partners to help put Moringa on the map as an industry, as a specialty crop in the Mid-South. So I'm very encouraged to continue to partner. And I want to know what kind of role, Dr. Waterman, I can play in this current grant that we have to, I guess, complete before March 22nd, on March 22nd. So anyway, you all are doing a great job. I'm glad to be part of at least the listening team right now. And thank you so much for the time to make a presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I mean, I think you're definitely helping with some of the Moringa work and these new projects to get new farmers in the US. I had sent you an email yesterday about there's basically from the USDA calls for new and beginning farmers. They're, $600,000-$700,000 for people who've never been farming. So there are a lot of people within California and the US applying for them. And so Dr. Barry Colley and I and James are trying to assist some of these people who are going in for these grants. Because currently in the US, the average age of the farmer is, 65 plus. There aren't farmers anymore. And that's a huge issue. And I think, Barry, what you highlighted is that it's not just the act of farming, or it's not just the act of teaching, right? But it's how do people develop the skills at a more leadership level of organization? I think, Salim, you guys are doing the same thing with Kibera Social Arts too. It's not just training kids how to do capoeira, but then how can they teach capoeira? How can they run an organization? So it's not just how can I grow tomatoes, but can I build a tomato cooperative? And these are the things that get to a sense more of collective security that I think we're looking for. So great. I really appreciate that. And with this grant, I think we can talk more. It's just $10,000 and it's a pilot project to basically, I think, have a list of resources, and you're a perfect example who's really somebody who's working with the farmers, but then also can utilize not just the science of agriculture, but of economics and policy and interventions. So let me see if I can go back. Christian's also joined the call, so I will let him also speak. Christian, do you want to introduce yourself? And if you want, I can pull up your website while I introduce you.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. This is a dynamite conversation. I can already tell. Glad to be a part of it. My name is Christen Brown. I've been doing some work around Moringa and its relationship to sickle cell anemia. So being able to utilize the plant as a way that we can cut the dependency on Western, pharmaceutical companies, and just the exploitation of our genetic material based on us not being able to really understand what type of staple foods that we should be incorporating into our daily nutrition. We've been looking at sickle cell for the last few years, just of it being, an iron-rich food, and understanding that sickle cell is not the narrative that it's been presented to us in the Western world. So with the narrative of sickle cell being a genetic upgrade to help defend the body from malaria in North and West Africa, it wasn't until we had our traditional diets disastrally disrupted through colonialism that the sickle cell anemia aspect, started to play. So when we look at our brothers and our sisters on the continent of Africa and throughout the diaspora, they do share the sickle cell trait with us, but they do not share the level of anemia that we have here in North America. And it has a lot to do with the foods that are available, as well as, the food deserts, the liquor store availability, and just not us going through this process of being a prisoner of war. The process of it was being able to have your culture stripped from you, your ability to develop rites of passage is stripped from you, your food stripped from you. So we're at a point now where we're trying to include some of the processes that our ancestors participated in that allowed them to be solid. Food is a huge part of it. So being able to grow the moringa tree to be able to eliminate the anemia associated with sickle cell anemia that's looked at in the Western world as a blood disease, when it truly is a nutritional deficiency. And moringa being able to have such a high iron, the iron richness, as well as the isothiocyanide being known to have an anti-cyclone effect, is actually a perfect way that we can use the food as the medicine, participate in food justice, as well as being able to grow culturally specific food, eliminate some of the nutritional deficiencies that we face inside of the Black community as well.
Great. So Christian and I have really just started to partner and work both on this CDFA grant that I've just been funded on to promote moringa production and consumption in California. And he's been vital, as well as James, in really, since I was in Kenya before coming back here, in connecting with these communities that are already doing this, right? Again, so it's not just starting from scratch, but you already find people who have this momentum. Who's already aware. I was not aware of the sickle cell connection with moringa. I knew it was iron rich. So again, it's like we come together and we're both learning, right? And of course it makes sense. So that's really great. And then again, with these food justice centers, Christian is again at this transition zone of being well connected in the communities and also incredibly intelligent and accessible to grant funding, researchers, and these types of things that can help other people who are in that transition, right? Who haven't started a business before, because again, it's not just the actual act, but then how does that grow and how do you scale up? And a lot of times there's a lack of resources in communities or even the impetus to do that. So that's been really vital and inspiring, I think, to offer that to this center that, an example even, all of these, everyone's organization and LLC is an example. So I know when I write grants, it's like, find something that you like from somebody else and use that as a model. And so I think now we have lots of models of what works in different places and can really use that moving forward.
Can I touch on the Moringa Festival real quickly?
Yeah, for sure.
So on Earth Day this year, from April 23rd to the 25th, we're going to be our goal is to plant 6,000 moringa trees within 48 hours on a 5-acre lot in Marysville. We got a lot of camping equipment donated to us for up to 200 people to be able to come out and camp. They don't have to necessarily bring any camping supplies because the sleeping bags, the cooking supplies, all those type of things will be available. But the end goal is to do what we're talking about right now, which is to be able to establish a food justice system using, the planting 1,000 moringa trees as a small blueprint of how we can, through sweat equity, through community, through, charitable, donations or whatnot, that we can be able to establish our own food system. The planting of 6,000 trees, not necessarily, it's not a million like what happened in Ethiopia, but it's, a step in the right direction. So from April 23rd to the 25th, we're going to go up to Sugarloaf Moringa Farm, which is a Black-owned Moringa farm in Marysville. And what we're going to do is we're going to stay a few days, and within 48 hours, we want to put 6,000 Moringa trees in the ground. Dr. Waterman blessed us with some Moringa seeds, so we'll be able to use those. We got those now. So it's an open invitation for whoever will want to come out and join and be a part of that process. I think right now, being able to put trees in the ground and with Mother Nature in that way, and in a way that's reciprocated, is very important just for our vibratory frequency and just our outlook on what life can be. People go their whole lives and they may have never put a tree in the ground, so this is a good opportunity to kind of put us on the cutting edge about what we want the future to be.
Excellent. I also like the birds in the background. This is kind of how Christian rolls. He's always got just like beautiful energy around him.
It's love.
It's love, yeah. So that's great. And again, this is a good example of where Christian and Colley were kind of moving in this direction, and I was able to get state funding. So, the seeds are really being paid for by the state of California and by the federal government, but that's what's great, right? We're using federal funds to then channel into projects that we're all on board with, and we're speaking the same language and are mutually beneficial. So I'll just kind of wrap things up, unless I'll just finish up these slides, but this is really what we're trying to do in building this network. And these are kind of asks, obviously, from a very grant format of what they're looking for. And it's been inspired and well established through this, through this group of people that we've been building, and continues to grow. And as I mentioned to people, that we were doing this, there's even more and more names that have come up. So this will include partners from 3 UC campuses, 2 of these UC A&R extensions, services, 9 California partners, 6 US partners, and 7 global partners. So the idea will be that each session would have someone from each of those places, right? So there's a representative from Africa, there's a representative, Barry's maybe on there, from Arkansas, we've got Christian from California, and we've got a university rep. And so these would be recorded and shared. And so we, basically compile those and potentially develop them into a course then. And then we'll also have a website and platform, because everything is, so relevant with social media, and be able to list resources, books, other talks. And basically, a lot of the people on this panel are really well educated in these fields, have expertise. And so even just, simply sharing a book list can be really good for people to start. The author of this book, Black Food Matters, Hannah Garth, is at UC San Diego. She's also on the grant and will be participating. She was going to be our San Diego representative, but she just got a job at Princeton. So congratulations to her, and she'll still be participating in this. And it's just, that's such an honor too. I mean, I looked her up on the back of the book, looked up her email, sent her an email, and she said, I'd be happy to be on your project. So that's also, I think, the point of this is sometimes people very well, and sometimes it's also just good to really reach out. And so here's kind of the growing list of people and their different websites and organizations. And we'll then build this out. So each slide would have, I kind of did it a little crudely by going to people's websites, but this would be accessible to have in a database. And that's kind of our project. As I said, they're definitely looking for more health outcome indicators from the project. And so I have to kind of think about what those are in terms of measurables, like things like mortality. Could we do, after this 1-year grant of $10,000, then it would hopefully go into very large projects, like $1 million interventions that are specific, right? And then what are those outcomes? So for example, Christian, if you partnered with some public health people and they were able to track the communities that you're working in and say, is this, do they 20 years down the line, are they healthier because they learned how to plant trees and learned how to garden? And you can start to see those effects. And so
Yeah.
I think as public health people, they want us to write in some of those things, even if they're a bit dreamy. But I'm also curious about these surveys that measure things like happiness, you know,
I
and
think
quality of life.
with some of the work that you've already done around, you know, understanding the daily use of moringa and how it impacts hemoglobin. You know, I've seen some of that in your research. That's huge, you know, for somebody to be able to put that information in, because that's a huge thing within the sickle cell community, is being able to, you know, find natural ways outside of blood transfusions that the hemoglobin be increased. So if we're, you know, if the research has already been done and it says, you know, from somebody who has a PhD, using moringa as a staple food can increase hemoglobin. That's a huge statement that me just probably just being a father with a background in sociology, you know, that's kind of taken with a grain of sand. But when someone who's actually been studying, you know what I'm saying, in North America and Africa, about that information, that puts us front and center about how we can actually use food as medicine. And so I think that, you know, that work or those steps in that direction have already, you know, for the most part been done. And then also with us being able to give moringa, you know, health packages, the sickle cell community free of charge is, you know, the first step in being able to really establish a food justice system, you know, in a way that we can take care of some of our most vulnerable members. So I think being able to have, you know, public health officials involved is good, but I definitely don't want to overlook the fact that, you know, you've already done a great piece of that work by, you know, adding that information, you know, the relationship between moringa consumption and hemoglobin.
Yeah, I mean, Moringa's been interesting, where I've already been funded on projects that involve like an agricultural farming component and then health outcomes. But the idea, so I just want to be clear, there's Christian and I and all of us are working on Moringa specifically, and then this UC Global Food Justice Center would be relevant to anything food justice, not necessarily Moringa. We would use that as kind of an example, but there's certainly a lot of other things that are relevant. So even just as I was saying, the effort of a gardening project is certainly an intervention that could have health outcomes on mental health, regardless of actually the nutritional aspects of the food, just the act of gardening, right? Or doing capoeira and engaging, as how does that have an effect on health? And how do we monitor and evaluate these more community-based programs? So I guess that's what I'm saying. Academia is very good at saying, I'm going to test this hypothesis and show you the results and be able to show you if it worked or not. Whereas I think sometimes community projects don't always have, I mean, they're moving more towards an M&E. But that's what we would want with these food justice systems, is that people who go into programs have a better idea of the economics of it and the health. And as Dr. Berry was saying, the business side of it, you know, not just I'm going to jump in and start growing, you know, strawberries because they're great. Well, how am I going to play out in the market, right? So those things I think are what the food center is really ultimately aiming to provide people with tools to get research partners and make those assessments, you know. And so whether you're doing, as I said, a yoga project or a health project or a gardening project, how do we get the funding, get the network, and then evaluate where it works so you can do different iterations of it. For example, I just met a woman who's working with teff flour. She owns the local Ethiopian restaurant here, and they're trying to grow teff now in California because, again, of climate issues. So wheat flour will likely not be able to be grown here in about 50 years. So again, they're looking at these ancient, very hardy grains to start to fill other needs. And then, like, the irony of it too is that there's, you know, an anti-gluten craze in the US. Well, teff flour has always been gluten-free. So when I go into the restaurant, I usually say, can I have the brown injera? And they say the gluten-free. And I said, yeah. So it's like, you know, this stuff was always gluten-free. And now, again, it's like this, oh my gosh, the new superfood that's been around for 10,000 years, you know. but that's fine. I mean, we all need to be learning about more foods and eating more diverse diets and not forgetting what our ancestors ate, because it can happen real quick. You know, it can happen within a generation sometimes. So bringing those, like, I mean, even the word research, right? We are researching what we already knew or what we already had and found. So that's kind of, I think, the essence of it. And does anyone else want to share any thoughts? I know this was kind of all over the place, but the idea is just really to get more people talking.
I don't know. I've noticed Adrian the hand up. I don't know if you had a question or comment, Adrian.
Yes, thank you so
Or
much
if
for
it's just up.
unmuting me. Yeah, no, it's not just up. It's really a hand. I would like to thank everybody on this call. Well, you hear my accent, but specifically, brother, how you call it, Michael? Because I know him under Imhotep, right? Can you hear me, brother Imhotep, brother Griot, Michael? Are you unmuted?
Christian, yes.
Oh, Christian, yeah.
Christian, okay, because I don't know your name, Christian. You introduce yourself as Christian, right? How are you, brother? He's the
Doing
one
well.
who,
How about yourself?
yeah,
How you doing?
yeah, he's the one who invited me on the call because connected through his platform, and I'm going to introduce myself. Yes, my name is Adrienne Bamboudiagne. I'm specifically from Senegal, West Africa. A midwife, reproductive health specialist, nutritionist, HIV/AIDS, and a specialist too. And I work, first of all, as a midwife in Senegal. I learned there. And after that, I worked for Doctors Without Borders in 22 countries, including Tanzania, then Amakuru, Tanzania, Jambo. I see somebody from Kenya, Jambo Kaka in Kenya too, South Sudan, Burundi, Amakuro, I think there are Burundian there, Ethiopia, Denane, and I speak different languages. I work also in Nicaragua and Honduras. I speak like 7 languages, but can't say word in 32. And I know moringas before I was even born because my great grandma and my family, we cook moringa in Senegal. We use moringa, we cook it, we grow it. I have here my bags of moringa seeds, moringa powder, moringa leaves, moringa oil. If you see my skin, I'm 58 now. I'm gonna take my glass off, but I don't any product here in the United States because I've learned from my great grandma how to use traditional oil and traditional product like shea butter, like neem oil, and I am a traditional healer also, meaning I'm a medical professional. I'm based in Los Angeles, California, but I'm also a traditional healer. And at the same time, I'm a cook. I do, people call me to cater for them. The best thing that I can say is, I know what moringa can heal and can cure, including diabetes, including cholesterol, including high blood pressure, including the sickle cell, and I'm talking about that since 15 years. And I have a daughter that is 18 right now who is doing the same, meaning she started when she was little. She has eczema here in the United States. She was born in France. She was traveling with me. And I figured out that all the product they were giving me was still continuing to build her eczema. We start using natural product and she used it today. And I figured out that her eczema was gone. Meaning, since this time I do my own skin product, but also I cure other people looking for their situation, their skin situation or their situation, and I provide the different product. Now I'm gonna show you something, sorry for that. You see here you have stain on my skin. It was a 3-degree burn. 3-degree burn, still don't have any more stains because I use traditional product. I use what my great grandma was using to heal my skin. In less than a week, I was out of the 3-degree burns were really not showing anymore, just some small stain. And my daughter is telling me it's going out more. I use the product that I have. Meaning, again, as brother Imhotep, I prefer Imhotep. Because it's like traditional day. Brother Imhotep.
That's an honor.
Yeah, well, King, I know King. And again, that's why I'm here today, to just connect, be sure that I can assist the people. And Moringa, my daughter called me the Moringa lady because I believe 100% of that. I was born with 4.95 pounds. Moringa saved my life. Look at me, I don't look like a baby who came with 4.95 pounds. Meaning, yes, Moringa has a big power, like we call it, never die in Wolof, in my native language, is meaning never die, but we change it into never die. Yeah, you guys call it Moringa. And I know that here in the market, people are rushing to take the product like Whole Food. You go to Whole Food, you find Moringa, and they call it superfood. They give you some shot of Moringa. You go now, everybody that's where you have big corporation, they are taking on to that. Meaning, what our brother Imhotep is doing with the Moringa, I'm gonna help, but I will be happy to assist you guys. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I mean, I think at some point we kind of divided our, this idea of food and medicine. And obviously, that's been said for a long time, let your food be your medicine. So I think plants have a lot of, elements that we need in our diet. And we kind of shifted to more just looking for calories instead of plants, that have these protective and health benefiting attributes that we need kind of all the time. So I really appreciate everyone's time, and some of it's just hearing stories, and sharing and keeping that movement that we can be empowered. We can grow vegetables 10 feet from us, even if we live in an apartment, and there are communities everywhere, right? And we all need food. So I think sharing voices of empowerment such as these with people who may not have had access to these ideas is really what we're trying to do. So with that, Salim, I thank you for this platform. I thank you all for coming. Please stay in touch, reach out, share more about what you're doing, and we'll continue to share about what we're all doing.
Thank
Peace and
you.
blessings.
Beautiful presentation, everyone. I really appreciate the diversity of voices that I heard today. So much information. This was kind of a snapshot, and everyone here is doing so much more. Thank you, Carrie, for galvanizing, organizing these incredible, incredible people and the projects, and also putting it together in a, in a pretty tight narrative. Really beautiful. So just to kind of step back again, this is the Synergy Sangha. Pardon me for leaning in and not having much light on my face. I'm reporting in from Lamu, Kenya, and there's not much light where I'm at. It's nighttime here, but we have these sanghas every other Sunday. So you can go to synergy.yoga. It's not .com, synergy.yoga. The sanghas. We're also moving into now live retreats. We are a yoga school, so we're moving into live retreats, including 2 in Peru next month, and then a couple of in Kenya the following months after that. We'll have a yoga retreat in Oregon in July as well. So just check us out for our other programming. Carrie is very much a community member, and we do make a big effort to create platforms for people in the community, which is you all as well, to share your knowledge, share your information, come together in spaces, and to basically build out the world that we're moving into. So deepest gratitude for taking the time. I think we are gonna wrap it up here for today. But Carrie, is there any, I think one thing I would say, I think most people here actually do have your info because it's mostly folks in the community. Is there anything though, in terms of following up, in terms of information or website or any info that we should know in terms of keeping in touch?
Sure. I just added my website that we're kind of building out. And then we have one that we're doing this week on California Moringa. So that'll be the Moringa Project. And then mine at least can give you my email and some other connections to try and, keep getting funding. We've got entrepreneurs, farmerpreneurs, and I'm a grantpreneur. So, we're all kind of coming together. So reach out if you need help with a grant or want ideas or, So thank you, Salim. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, and thanks for bearing with us too as I got up in daylight savings time. I know Lisa did as well. She was late because of that, which is good. You came on right with us. We remembered at the same time, Lisa. The rest of the world doesn't have it, so we get a little confused sometimes.
It's the strange things. Yeah. Thank you all so much. Have a good Sunday.
Yeah, stay safe, everybody.
Bye.
Take care, family. Thank you all so much.
Thank
Thank you so
you.
very much. Thank you.